I am so excited today to bring you Emma Crutchley. She's actually a dear friend, but most importantly, someone who I deeply respect in the agricultural sector in New Zealand, has been a great leader, a great influencer, and someone that creates change. So thanks for chatting with me, Emma, even though we chat all the time anyway, but thanks for having this very formal conversation via podcast.
Thanks, JJ. I think we'll have to try and keep it formal, won't we? But thanks for having me. I am thrilled to be here, and those words back at you, because you're also someone I admire in the sector, and talk to a lot. So no, cheers.
Hello, you live in somewhere where I could never pronounce. So can you talk us through who you are? You know, you're Emma the leader, Emma the mother, Emma the wife, Emma the farmer. Talk us through what's happening. What do you do? What's your life?
First and foremost, I'm a mother and a wife to my husband, Kyle, and we've got two children, Evelyn and Reuben. So Evelyn is 10 years old and Reuben is 8. We live in Central Otago, an area called the Maniatoto Basin, near a little town called Ranfurly, and we're sheep, beef, and arable farmers. And so I grew up here. I grew up in the Maniatoto on this farm, and travelled away after I left boarding school and worked around New Zealand, probably in Christchurch and Wellington, and then always wanted to farm. So I came back to the farm in 2009, and at that time my husband, not my husband then, but he moved up from Southland actually, and we started to sort of work at home and towards taking over the family farm, which is a real passion of mine, because growing up I was always outside. I love the farm, I love animals, and I'm also very passionate about agriculture. So yeah, it was a bit of a no-brainer.
So how did you transition from, so you're on the farm, how did you then end up in leadership? Like, did it find you? Did you seek it out? Did it just did you happen upon it? What was the turning point?
Well, probably, I don't know. I'm always probably quite outspoken, but I guess the real probably catalyst for it was we're actually irrigators, and we farm in one of the driest regions of New Zealand. Like where we farm, we are 350 mil rainfall, so that means that irrigation is pivotal to what we do. We cannot be a resilient farming business without irrigation. And I guess in 2017, the election campaign and that sort of change in government and politics at that time was steering down a path of taxing freshwater for irrigation use, and that or what did they call it at the time? They called it a royalty, right? And so we could see the impact that was going to have on our rural community, and so there was a group of us sort of stepped out and became quite outspoken in that space. And I've also got a family, and my father was very, very involved with the setup of irrigation and water use in the Maniatoto and catchment management. The Upper Taieri catchment group was probably one of the first integrated catchment management models in the country, and so there was always that history as well. So it's probably an area I grew up in, being involved in, but then that was probably my sort of first launch into being involved in that space back then. And from then it just sort of probably snowballed a little bit.
And catchment group, so you've done a lot of work with catchment group, federated farmers, I think. So I'd love to know how many submissions you've written.
We sort of worked around kicking off the catchment group stuff back after the election, because you can see that a community needs to sort of collaborate around the challenge. And at that time, the challenge that was given to us was the change in government and the threat of regulation, which was not fit for intended purpose. So brought together a group, multi-stakeholder group, and I guess that sort of folded into in 2020 when the Freshwater Improvement Fund, or the Jobs for Nature funding, became available. And one of the things with catchment groups, as you'll know, is they're incredibly under-resourced. And so we had all these things we wanted to do or in the catchment, but there was no funding, and you're always limited by your funding. If there's no money to do anything, you can't expect volunteers to do it. So we actually put in an application for $4.5 million of funding for a $6 million multi-stakeholder project, and got that going. And off the back of that, spent a lot of time over 2 years sort of being involved in setting up that project, but off the back of that sort of became more involved with Federated Farmers and the support they gave us around there. So that led me to joining the Feds exec in Otago with when Mark Peterson was president, and Mark's a great guy, so I really enjoyed working with him over the next year, sort of probably, what was it, 2022 then, somewhere around there. And also always kept my involvement in irrigation and interested all through, did a lot of governance through local irrigation companies, and then so it sort of made sense to follow that through into Irrigation New Zealand. So director for Irrigation New Zealand as well. And I guess one of the other things that was a real learning opportunity for me was I knew that I didn't know a lot about regulation or what was driving a lot of this change when we did that campaign against the water tax in 2017. So that led me to go and do my Kellogg's leadership program and the Kellogg's research that I did, and that led to do a big project on freshwater and how you manage it, and it sort of highlighted that it all comes back to those people. And so that project was a big driver, and that sort of led me into being really interested in a lot of the big wicked challenges that there are, like climate, freshwater quantity, which is a juicy one, way more juicy than just quality alone, because everything interlinks, and so you sort of find yourself in amongst these big challenging topics, and a lot of people don't like to go there because they're so complex, and everyone can pick a different part of those topics, and so it's quite contentious as well, and emotive, because everyone has a right to fresh water. So I guess I've just sort of snowballed my way in there.
And you went through AWDT as well, escalated program, so you kind of have always continued your learning, haven't you?
I love learning, and I love being around people, and so I guess a lot of that stuff is because they're such challenging topics, you question yourself and your belief in yourself. And I could see, like, the escalated program with AWDT, you see a lot of like amazing women come out of that, like yourself, and I guess I was really interested in the networks and also improving myself, because Kellogg's does a lot of leadership stuff that looks at the wider sector and outside your personal being, but it doesn't really focus on you and what holds you back. And so I was really, really interested, or curious to get into that program and actually dig a little bit deeper into who actually is Emma. And along that journey, I think we did that in 2020, and we got the Escalator Deluxe, as I like to call it, because COVID hit right in the middle, and therefore it extended out for an extra 6 months or so. And so I actually really needed that, because you know what it's like, you have to lean in and really question yourself, and you've got your walls up, and I was all armored up, like, because a lot of the I'm not gonna lie, a lot of the community stuff I did, you wear a lot of armor, because you get a lot of there's a lot of swords come your way. And so it took a lot of time to sort of peel those layers off and really get to the crux of who I was, or who I was trying to be, I suppose. And so we graduated with an amazing group of ladies in April 2021.
So I mean, you've done heaps of learning. I guess what fascinates me is, we talk about the emotional topics, and whether it be where you live or whether it be that, they found you, but you kind of end up in the middle of it. So can you talk us through, and I know I'm obsessed with this and I know you've done other things, but can you talk us through the Tyree scrolls? Like what was that? What was happening there? What is it? And what did you have to do?
Yeah, so the upper Tyree scroll plane, like I think I've talked a little bit about the environment we live in, like it's a semi-arid inland basin with a really, really low rainfall, and it's the headwaters of the Tyree River. And so we live on the Maniatoto Plain, but there's also the Styx Basin, which is part of the same catchment, a massive, massive area, and also incredibly flat. And so the Tyree headwaters is fed by many tributaries that flow into the Styx Basin, and that's, gosh, it's quite a high altitude, like it's not far off 1,000 meters above sea level, don't quote me, but it hits this flat area, and it, because there's no fall, it winds, it meanders, and so it's a incredibly unique landscape, and probably the only one of its own kind that we find in the southern hemisphere of that scale. And so when a lot of water hits that scroll plane, it sort of fills up into this massive, wide, low flow, like lake that's really wide, and it looks like just a big lake. But then as the flow drops over the summer, it'll drop right down, and suddenly it's this small channel that meanders like a snake, and you can paddle through it in your red bands. And so it goes from one extreme to the other. But what's special about the scroll plains is it will hold water in the outer parts of it, and as the flow drops, it maintains the flow of the river all the way down to the coast. And so importance, hydrology wise, that's an important part of how the ecosystem works. But in terms of and this is probably something that everyone will relate to, is that when those national regulations hit and the MPS freshwater 2020 hit, it was a much more top-down, one size fits all framework, and we saw it coming a mile away. We'd sort of operated a catchment level, and we'd tried to sort of preempt some of the stuff and work in a plan, so we'd front-footed it. But then the freshwater 2020 landed, and we're like, well, wetland regs, this is not going to work. And so from then we had our Jobs for Nature funding, which was the scroll plane was a big catalyst for that application that we did. I think it was worked really, really closely with a good friend of mine at the time, Matt Hickey, who's a freshwater scientist, and also Morgan Schroeder, who at that time worked for Fish and Game. So it was us three, and we sort of trying to get some momentum around developing a plan for managing this unique area, realizing that the rules as they were going to land were not going to be fit for purpose. And so that gave us a little bit of funding to sit in behind what we were doing to pull people together. But we knew that if we were really going to make any momentum in creating change around this, that it wasn't just going to be driven by a group of farmers, because the thing about complexity of the challenges we face is that everyone can find a little part of the science or that will suit a story that they're trying to tell. So it doesn't come down to science. It comes down to a group of people sitting down, knowing that they don't all want the same thing, but what principles can they agree on? And so that was really important. And we wrote a letter back in, I think it was 2022, because things weren't moving along. And by 2023, I think, with the stock exclusion rules, the way they were, it was looking at cattle being excluded from thousands and thousands of hectares. I think in total, the Maniatoto Basin alone is pushing 3,000 hectares. And so we could see the unintended consequence of that, i.e. long undergrowth, which was going to swamp out a natural character and the way the river would operate, and the willows, the cracked willows that would grow up, and they clog the river, and therefore it doesn't flow like it should, and you lose those the ability of the water to reach those outer oxbows and channels that then support low flow, and also to a lesser extent the loss of grazing land. But to resonate with the people that are trying to regulate you, you need to actually tell a story that makes sense, and that is not going out and saying, we can't farm anymore because we're going to lose all this grazing land. That doesn't resonate with
you just
people.
hate farmers.
Yeah, it doesn't resonate. People just go, well, that's not a reason. We're worried about the environment. So the story that we actually had, and it's a true story, is that you could see the unintended consequence for the environment and for downstream communities and for the river itself. And the loss
took a whole systems
character.
approach, right? So you combined your
Yeah.
science, you combined your community, you combined your farming needs. You took a whole systems approach.
But bureaucracy, as you know, moves incredibly slow. So it was the challenge is to get in a place where you actually can not only tell their story, but you're talking to the right person who actually can make the difference. And I work quite hard at building relationships with a lot of people at MFE, and was able to pivot off a lot of those relationships to be able to keep pushing in that space, I suppose. And so those relationships, those networks, especially the ones you make through like your Agri-Women's Development Trust and your Kellogg's Rural Leaders, that they're so important in that space. And out of the blue, I think it was this time last year, we got a message from MFE, and it's like, Minister Parker is coming down. This is the Minister for the Environment, is coming down in a week. Can you tell us the best place to look at the scroll plane? And I was like, yes, absolutely. So we spent a day showing him those challenges, and that was when things really started to move, because it's clear as day when you come and look at it, right? It's clear. But I guess so the three key, tell me if I'm waffling, but the three key things: one, maintain those relationships across all those different sector or organizations, multi-stakeholder approach. And two is get people on the ground to actually look at the challenge. And one of the things we're really passionate about in this catchment is 1,000 cups of tea, and we'd get people up to look at it and then get them again and then get them again and then get them again, because it's, if you leave it a large gap, then you start to, it doesn't erode trust, but the relationship's not there as much, and people sort of become suspicious about what you're trying to do. So you just have to keep communicating with all those people. And so in, I think it was the 1st of July, it became the regs hit that it was, you could no longer graze your cattle on the scroll plane. But then about a month later, we managed to get, and I don't like the wording because it's quite confrontational. People don't know what we did, but it was, they called it a carve out. So the Apatauri scroll planes were carved out of the national regulations to enable us time, or till, I think we've got till 2025 to work with our regional council to build a fit for purpose plan based on the science that we're building, and a multi-stakeholder approach and a community approach, which you couldn't ask for a better opportunity. Yeah.
So you do all this, I mean, so, and, you know, just to, you know, when you bring someone in, you know, this was a couple of days, right, out of your life where you were, you know, and this was an opportunity, and as you said, you'd built these good relationships. And I think this is the leadership part, is you hadn't burnt bridges. You know, you may not have loved what you were always hearing, but you knew that you had to listen to be heard. But let's focus on, and we'll come back to the more positive, but so you've done this really cool thing. I'm assuming you're pretty proud of what the community has done and the outcome. How does it feel then to have the community, some people in the community that you are doing this for, kind of think you've done wrong, and then have, I guess, people who deem themselves environmentalists, even though you were thinking of the environment, you know, you've kind of pissed off two sides, right? So how does that feel when you've just worked so hard?
Yeah. So, like, don't get me wrong, there's a lot of people who are like awesome, amazed at what we've achieved, and I guess you're always going to get a part of society that's really suspicious about what you're doing, because what we see now in 2020, oh my gosh, it's 2024, is the 2024, the world is becoming more and more divided and siloed, and a political,
it's created a new word.
politically labelled. And so if you are sitting anywhere in the middle of that stuff, you open yourself up for criticism.
Yeah.
And I guess I'm really interested in this topic, right? And I've done a lot of digging around misinformation and sort of human behaviour. And I guess some people, they don't know what they don't know. And I guess I try and have a little bit of empathy around that, because like some people aren't into this stuff like me, right? I love getting involved in these complex conversations, but the average person who loves to farm, doesn't want to get involved in politics, doesn't want to get involved in policy discussions, they don't know what I'm doing. And I guess I try and have a little bit of understanding around that. And if they're going to criticize for that, it's probably like I try and understand it, because they just don't know what they don't know. And then the same as on the other side. And I think people that weren't involved in the discussion that we had, they're the same. They don't know what they don't know. But some people, and this is where it gets tricky, right? Because if you're sitting on the outside of that discussion and you're not trying to talk to people face to face, like social media, right, as a catalyst, if you're throwing grenades in from the outside, then this is where I like to call it, you actually have to realize that you're part of the problem. Because I'm getting interrupted. Hold on a second, sorry, Bob. Are you coming in?
Oh, that's awesome. Hey, look, that's the reality, right? You're trying to lead,
yeah.
and you're trying to run
yeah.
a family and a farm, and this is it. You're always going to have priorities that are sometimes clashing.
Yeah. And I guess,
and then you've got people in your face about what you're doing.
And I've lost my train of thought now, sorry. Edit that bit out.
No, we were just talking through, like when you've got both sides, and I love that you have that empathy. But I mean, how do you? I can also imagine the disappointment. Like it's not like you set out because you get a magic. It's not like you got a gold medal or an award for this. Not that you're looking for any of that, but there's no magic reward for it. You're actually doing it for the community, and you're doing it for the environment. I know that you're a staunch kind of, you farm with the environment in mind, as farmers do, because in all of our best interests, right? But how do you deal with that disappointment when, although you're empathetic to it, how do you deal with the disappointment of thinking, God, I just, what the hell?
Well, you never take away from the fact, and I think we had this conversation the other day, that it actually hurts. And so, like, I think we talked a little bit about, and I'm going to be bold here, is that sometimes I'll walk into a cafe or something and you'll sort of say hello to people and you'll get nothing. And that's fine. And you sort of try and build a wall around that. But I think you've got to let that hurt in, because if you lose that hurt, you lose your humility. And so it's not about putting the armor on and saying, oh, no, I'm just going to ignore that. And I think also trying to understand what they might be thinking as well. And when you can do that, you can actually sort of maybe identify with that and just sort of, it takes a few days to get over it, but just let it go. But it's never think that anyone is walking around in a leadership role and that how they get treated doesn't hurt, because it doesn't matter what age and stage you're at, right? Like those blows can come at any time and are always going to sting. Is that right?
I think it's a hard one though, isn't it? Because how do you actually how do you get up the next day? So you've walked into a cafe, somebody's kind of given you this like, screw you, you feel terrible. How do you get up the next day?
The people around me. The people like you guys, the people and other leadership positions that you can actually just ring up and go, oh my gosh, this just happened. And also realizing that it's probably not you at all. Like I think one of the most powerful things I had during my escalator journey, and I was standing in a doorway in a building, probably completely in the way, and this guy in Wellington just shoved past me and he blew me out of the way, like I tripped sideways. And I looked around at one of the girls I was doing the escalator with and I said, wow. And she said, oh my gosh, he's probably just had a really bad news. He might just be having a really bad day. And like it's pulling it back to that fact that sometimes it's actually not about you at all, like that. And it was kind of like an aha moment, and I realized, yeah, that sometimes I feel like that too. And that guy walking out of the building might have just got, someone might have passed away, he might have just got some really bad news, and so who am I to judge that? I'd probably do a similar thing, and sort of pull it back to that, I guess. But yeah, I guess there's a strength in relationships and networks and a lot of people that are working through the same stuff.
Yeah. I mean, it's, and I guess when you look at the stuff that you do, when you're touching on that, I guess sensitive, for the need of a better word, side of things, then you're going to naturally have that emotion around you, aren't you? So if you can take yourself out of it, I mean, I know you walk to the top of ginormous mountains on your farm, you do some incredible stuff. So I guess, you know, it's about making sure that you're actually in that space.
And like one of I love exercise, and I love running, and I love all that stuff, but one of the things I really do if it's been really hard one day with everything just hasn't gone right is we've got this massive hill right up behind our house, and I just get out and I run straight up it. And your lungs are burning, but you just keep pushing, and you get to the top, and you just sort of stand there and look at the view, and you just realize how lucky we are. Like, we're so lucky to actually be able to run out my back gate and run straight up a hill, and therefore, yeah, gratitude, I suppose.
And also to have the most crazily insane, you know, surroundings and all that as well. That's what blows my mind, is, you know, like what you have around. So like when we're thinking in leadership and we look at it, like how, like where do you think, you know, do you ever have moments of reflection where, God, I could have done this better, or hey, look, I've really done this well? Is there any kind of moments like that?
Yeah, 100%. Like I think as a culture, we are shockers, and this is the way I grew up, right? So I've had to call myself pretty heavily on this stuff in the past 6 years. It's perfectionism. There is such a focus on perfectionism, and if you get things wrong, like, you're a failure. And sort of having to sort of I've had to push really hard through this a few times, is that yes, I've absolutely screwed up from time to time, but it's kind of saying, well, you know, that's okay. If you learn from it, then it's not a failure, is it? But you've got to make sure you do learn from it. But it's sort of having the sort of being able to tell yourself that, yeah, okay, I can actually, I'm going to try and do things, or do it right, but like, then if you do fail, being able to say, okay, yeah, I learned from that, move on. That doesn't mean I have to eliminate myself from the conversation.
Yeah, that's a good point, actually, because I think sometimes it's frustrating, and so we sort of do, you know, we step out.
Yeah, and we're our own biggest critics, right? Like, sometimes the worst poundings, or the worst bruises you can get is the ones that you give yourself.
Oh shit, yeah. And so with that, how do you, because, you know, look, I know you well, and I've been there when you have actually, you know, given yourself a bit of a hiding. What do you know, like, how do you get yourself through that? How do you stop feeling like, you know, you've actually deserve a beat up?
Letting it in and acknowledging it, and also the people around me, like my kids, and my kids are a big part of it, right? Because you sort of that's why we're doing all this stuff, right? And they're sort of, they teach me as much as I teach them, I think, at times. And it's like, yeah, okay, if my kids did this, what would I tell them? And then try and actually tell that to yourself as well. That's been really powerful. Yeah.
I mean, and how do you work with yourself? Because I know that you take things, and I mean, when I say personally, I don't think you take things personally. I think you're amazing, because you take a lot of punches. How do you sort of manage, because, you know, when things are happening, your heart is so big, I know that you care so much, so wide for the sector. How do you manage that?
it's picking your battles. You've got to let some stuff go. Like there's the stuff you'll see on social media, and there's stuff that comes at you in emails, and it's probably looking at it and going, is this something I really need to be involved with? And then prioritizing your time, because I think one of the biggest lessons is don't take everything on your own shoulders. And I think I see this in other people as well. Like like they care so much, and passion is an amazing thing, but when you're trying to solve all the different problems for everyone, then you actually realize you're actually really ineffective at it. So it's probably selecting the stuff that fits most within my lane or knowledge, or where I can make the most difference, and then actually just letting a lot of the other stuff fall to the side, because it's not my responsibility, it's not anyone's responsibility to take on the whole woes of the sector at once.
Yeah, it's hard not to though, right? Like, it's actually quite hard to not take all that on. It's hard to not be the person that, well, when you can see the solutions too. Like, let's face it, we've all been there and we've seen where the solution can be, but you know that there's lots of people against it, or there's a lot of people fighting really hard to battle against it, which makes it hard. I mean, how do you navigate that?
Sorry, something just popped up on my screen.
Oh no, that's right. I'm just quickly doing some stuff in the background here.
Sorry, but the questions jumped out of my mind. Sorry, JJ.
Oh, you're right. So, I mean, how do you, oh, not cope, cope's not the right word, but how do you navigate those times when people are basically like, hey, everything's wrong, everything's bad, and just coming to you? Because you get the thing is it's not that you put yourself in the corner, it's that people pull you in there.
Yeah, I think and a lot of that's negativity. And one of the biggest things I've always got in my mind from a video, I think we watched it when we were doing Escalator, is the way you react to negativity and the space that puts you in. And if you're always sitting in a negative mindset, there's no way you can have these complex conversations, because the wicked challenges we're facing are so complex that if you're coming from it from an area of threat, then you actually can't function. You'll focus on one thing, and you might be good at one message, but you can't think wider, you can't think outside the box. And I'm always reminding myself of that. And if you go into a conversation and you're feeling in threat, you can sort of feel it, and you're not going to contribute. So sometimes it's probably telling myself I have to take a step back and get on the phone, ring a Julia Jones, ring all those other amazing people in the sector, and saying, look, this has just come up, this is how I feel, can you help me through this? And a lot of that's actually really, really helpful, because someone who's not feeling that threat like you are can actually give you a different perspective, and therefore you can just go, oh yeah, and sit back and then actually process it and be able to move forward.
That's actually a really wicked point. Like, I love that. It's because that threat, right? Like, we're human, and we basically are
fight or flight.
Yeah. So somebody gives us and we just get, and you're right, when you talk to the person who hasn't felt that emotion, then they give you this kind of, I guess, outward perspective. But it takes courage to do that, Emma. Like, it takes courage to feel, and I take this from personal experience. I know myself, sometimes it's hard for me when I feel like I've really cocked up to actually kind of say, or not that I'm saying you've cocked up, or when I'm really in a headspace of like, I don't know, I'd almost say I'd lost perspective. My perspective goes down a rabbit hole. It's actually takes a lot to still reach out and test it.
Yeah. And it's also letting it go and realizing that you do not have to have all the answers. And I think I've seen people operate like in community situations where they're in a leadership role, and they think that they have to know the answer to every single question. And there is actually something really liberating about saying, you know what, I actually don't know. And also, can we figure this out together? Like, someone might come up with an idea that is contrary to yours, and one of the most powerful things in those situations is being able to say, can you give me your perspective, try and find where they're coming from, and then you can actually bring it up out of the weeds and to that high level of what can we actually agree on. Sorry, that was a bit of a segue, but it's the same thing. And it's just letting that in, that if we think we know all the answers to all this stuff, then we're probably part of the problem. And I think as a culture, we have to get ourselves to that stage because, and I touched on this before, but with climate science, right? There's science coming in from all different angles, and you can easily cherry pick a part of that science to fit the story that you're trying to tell. But one person is not going to solve a collective challenge. It comes down to many, many diverse perspectives. And if we're not prepared to actually lean into those conversations and actually give other people, have empathy for their thoughts, or give up other people airtime around that, then we're not going to move forward around some of those challenges.
One thing you've always taught me is, give people the freedom to change their mind. New information comes in. They may have said that the world was flat yesterday, but they read something new and they've learned some new information. And that's a very extreme example, but and today the world is round. And so I think that's one beautiful lesson I've got from you is allow people the freedom to change their mind.
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
and I've also stolen that and put it in several presentations. I thank you.
No, I think, well, you were part of that too. Like, I think the first half of that, I can't remember what was the first half of that quote. It was yours, so it was definitely a joint effort. But I think, it's just that liberating feeling of, like, you see people go down rabbit holes and around science and stuff, and they're stuck, and they feel like, and it's almost like there's no way out, because they feel like if they change their mind, they'll lose their following, they'll lose their what they've built that whole belief on. But
and their network and their support, and then we're all going to go, we told you so.
And it's like, how do you actually get those people to realize that it's okay to change your mind?
But it's also, I think it's even having the courage. I mean, God, I get heaps of stuff wrong, and I know sometimes when I've come out with a big call and then I've learned some new information, I'm like, oh geez, I think it's probably, you and I know that you lead by example. You come out and you just have the courage to say, actually, I learned something new.
And things are always changing, right? And we do that with farming. Like, I don't farm the same way my grandfather farmed, and I don't think he'd begrudge me for a lot of the stuff we're doing today either, because we live in a different world, and things are changing all the time, and you have to change and evolve with it. But that doesn't mean, or that doesn't take away from the fact that he operated in an era where they were responding to very different cues and values, societal values, export market values.
And things were, I mean, if I think about it, I mean, I wasn't around then, but although some days I feel like I was, but it's the pace of change in the world was very different. So the signals were 6 months, 12 months, 2 years, 3 years. We just, as a farmer, I can imagine you are just getting hit daily with signals, whether it be from within farming or external to farming. It's just signal after signal after signal.
And that's part of the problem, right? We live in an age where the information ecology is nuts. And I don't know whether that's the right terminology, but there is information coming at us from many different sources, and it's so overwhelming. And that in itself puts people in a state of threat, and they start looking for, you automatically look for, and I do this myself, you look for something you look for safety, and safety is sometimes in an echo chamber, but that is sometimes the most dangerous place to be, because when you're in an echo chamber, you're not open to those other perspectives, and therefore we're not going to move forward around some of those problems, because as I've said many times in this conversation, it's collective challenges. They're up to no silo or individual to say what's right or wrong.
And no one owns the exclusive rights to the hardship or the difficulty that they may bring. And so as collective as our answers will be, just as collective as our discomfort.
And I think that probably leads into, I'm probably going off track now, like, but that victim mentality around a lot of that stuff, and when, if you can only see how much of a victim you are, elaborate around this, will be going off track a little bit, but then if you're always thinking poor me, then that's another reason, that's another way to get stuck. You can't actually look at the opportunities you've got.
Yeah. Because you just you think it's happening to you, so you think someone else has the solution rather than looking for any of your own solutions or trying to create a pathway out. I mean, I think it's important too. I mean, and this is another thing that I've learned from you as well is, you know, shit happens that we can't control, that we don't like, that we have to accept.
Yeah.
So acceptance isn't necessarily liking or wanting. Acceptance can just be that I will not be able to move through this, whatever it is in life, if I don't accept.
Yeah, the uncontrollables. And I think that's a big part of sort of everything you've just talked about is control the controllables. As farmers, and we are really, really good in that space because we deal with the weather, right? We farm within an environment which is constantly chucking us uncontrollables. I mean, look at the east coast of the North Island. Like, there is so much in there you can't control. And if you are focused on the stuff that you can't control all the time, it takes you away from what you can. And often doing those things that you can control is what, and this is what I find, because we live in a really dry environment, right? Things can get challenging here at times. Doing those controllables is often what keeps you going. And I think, and so it's probably applying that mentality to a lot of the stuff we face today as a sector, with markets, with regulations. There is so much, even, and this is what I tell myself, right, is time is also a bit of an uncontrollable. I don't have the time to branch into that conversation, then it goes straight in the uncontrollable box because I can't do anything about it. I'm not taking it on my shoulders. What can I control, and what is those little things I can do that actually will make a little bit of a difference, and leave that other stuff to someone else.
Yeah, because if you're going to take time off out of your business, away from your children, away from your husband, you don't want to waste it on a circling the drain conversation that you know isn't going to go anywhere.
And I've and that's a lot about boundaries as well. And I just sent an email this morning because February is crazy, right? It's all booked up, and someone sort of come at me and said, can we get on a Zoom in February? And I've actually just looked at it and gone, I've learned from the past few years that I can't say yes to everything. And I just wrote an email back and said, look, you might get me on the phone for a couple of minutes, but my February is nuts. I'm out. And being able to do that and put some, because if we don't put value on our own time, how do we expect anyone else to do it? And that has been a huge hard lesson for me in the past few years, is because often, and I'm not saying that I'm good at any of this stuff by any stretch, but when you work in this stuff a lot, you get asked more and more to do stuff, and people just, there's an expectation there, right? And so it's to take a step back and go, well, actually, my volunteer time actually can't cope with that at the moment. No.
And I mean, I've known times where you've, driven 8 hours, you've been there and back to somewhere, then you're on a flight the next day, then you're coming back to take the kids to an appointment, then you've got something happening on the farm, then you're back in the car on the next, like it's I don't think, if I could help people understand one thing, and I'm not taking away from what you do, but you're not unique in that, because we know a lot of people that do, that the people in our sector that are leading and doing really big things for the sector aren't always the people that are on, and I don't begrudge the salaries. I mean, they're not always paid for what they do, right? And I know you don't begrudge it, but it's valuable skill. You are a very smart woman. You understand science, you understand nature, you understand farming, you understand how to work these things together, you understand people. And I think it's time. It's hard, and you have to be able to say no and have people not think that you're letting the team down. I think this is another thing I hear a lot, is people kind of make you feel like, oh, you're letting the team down. I thought you liked agriculture. I thought you were there for women. I thought you were, get this. And that's not a response. Like that. You got to say no. You got to give yourself space.
Yeah, there is a lot of passion in this industry, and it's realizing that passion is amazing, but it can show up in many different ways, and passion also burns out.
Yes.
Passion burns us out because we care, and we care about these conversations, we care about our sector, but at the same time, we need to put boundaries around where we target that passion, because otherwise you'll burn out very, very quickly.
Now, your advice for, I mean, not necessarily emerging leaders, it could be existing leaders, it could be people who feel like they're really alone doing things in their community, who walk into cafes and have people not acknowledge them, or who are the people that they go to the pub and everyone goes to the opposite corner or whatever. What's your advice to people who are in that position?
Although it's important to lean into a lot of this stuff and those conversations outside your silos. If you don't have your tribe, if you don't feel like you belong, there is a tribe. There is a tribe that exists, and it's just finding that. And because you can only contribute in a meaningful way if you're around people that actually value you as well. And it's stepping into, be brave, bold, step out. Sometimes the community stuff is so important, and I wouldn't begrudge anyone the kudos they deserve for actually doing any of that stuff. But if you need more, chase it. Get outside that silo. Get outside your community, because there is a massive amount of hugely passionate, amazing people right throughout the country. Yeah.
And I mean, we've got our group, and I think that was you instigated that. You brought a whole lot of us together, and I think the cool thing is to remember when people are building tribes, it's not about we don't always all agree. I don't farm. I think I do my little 10 acres, but the reality of it is I don't understand stuff from an on ground level, and I'll make some calls that are probably a little bit left field sometimes, and a little bit like whoa, And I think it's being in that group that actually have the courage to with in a nurturing way call each other to account, right? As actually say, are you sure about that, or that's not actually the reality?
A safe space to challenge idealisms is really important. And I guess one of the things I've learned over the last year is change happens in the middle, but you also have to, it's that humility you get from feeling those blows that gives you the empathy to actually try and see things from different perspectives and see things from different angles. Because I know that we've got some sort of fringe groups, and I don't agree with them, but I'm try really hard all the time to try and a little bit of empathy for them, because empathy is the way that you pull people together. We don't move forward. We want to move forward on a lot of these big challenges, right? But if we are kind of going, oh gosh, those fringe groups, I hate them, blah blah blah, then we're not that doesn't serve us. You know what I mean? It's sort of how do you, and we're never gonna, it's the courage to be disliked as well. You're never going to please everybody, but it's also when you see a little opening in a door, take it, because everyone is facing a challenge that we don't know as well.
Yeah. And I think, when you talk about the fringe groups as well, the thing is that you don't have to like but you can still understand why. There's none of us ever looks at the fringe groups and go, I don't get that. We all get where it starts, and we all understand where it's coming from. And I think people sometimes think just because they don't like some bits of it, they have to hate all of it. And I think, there's kind of a space for everyone. It's just, even those that and I know that I frustrate others, even those who frustrate us at times, or we may go, what the hell, they make us think differently. So we kind of need all the quirks of every quirk.
100%, we do, and that's I'm calling myself on that all the time, right? Because I, as a volunteer, you put a lot of stuff into, and you've got that all going on, but it's continuously trying to find common ground and empathy around that, and that everyone's just doing their best with the norms they've grown up with, or the communities they live in, and having some empathy around that.
And as you said earlier, we're all coming from a place of fear. I go there. We all go, we feel fear. Yeah,
we do.
It's a crazy driver. It makes us all do crazy things, and the fear of loss is the biggest thing, right? So the fear of, putting my feet in that water, there might be a crocodile, is quite different to the fact that the fear of, you are threatening my livelihood, you are taking away, and I'm not saying that everyone thinks this, but in some minds, this change, regardless of where it comes from, who caused it, whatever. It's fair.
Yeah, it's fair. And it's also like acknowledging the fact that although we're really, really lucky to live where we do as farmers on farms and have access to the outdoors, is that this is not easy either. Like there are some big headwinds facing us at the moment around commodity prices and all that. Like, these are really big, chunky challenges, and never take away from that. Like, that is hard.
And you can never run away from it, right? You can run up as many hills as you want. You can go on as many days off the farm as you like, but you're not ever, it's always in the back of your mind with these big pending things. And so it's, I guess, allowing yourself to, and this is where I want to reinforce with optimism, it's not about pretending those things don't exist. It's actually about allowing yourself to feel, as you said before, hurt, worried, upset, but not letting that overwhelm and rule you.
And I get this a lot, like people, and you say it really well, it's just because I'm trying to be positive about everything doesn't mean I can't see how challenging things are either. Like, I feel that because I'm a farmer, but I choose to try and put myself in a mindset that actually enables my brain to think outside the box, and try and surround myself with people that do the same to actually enable myself to cope with this. And that's
just listening to the language you use there, you put yourself, like, this is conscious, right? So you know, I think sometimes people think too, you wake up and you're just like super open-minded, Emma, and you're able to, you know, and I know for myself, I wake up some days and I just like, I want everything to be in a small box. I want everything to be the same. I don't want any change. And, you know, you actually consciously have to put yourself in a different space.
A chip and dip on the couch day.
100%. Now, last question for you here. Well, first, actually going to do two questions. What dip? Is it the onion dip, and what chips?
Depends on the day. Some days I just eat any.
No, it doesn't matter. You're like, oh, those are gross.
It's the condensed cream straight out of the tin without the onion.
You know you've hit the skids when that's happening. When you just the onion soup goes straight in the tin.
Yeah, I'm a sour cream and chives girl. Actually, those chips, they're not. It's kind of like they're a new brand. It's not Wakachang, but I don't even know. But they've got so much flavour and they're amazing. They're the best ones. But then I've got to support Heartland. All chips.
These bloody craft chippies. I don't know. What's wrong with a good Heartland chippy? A good Eater chippy? You know, all these women. I don't know. Yeah. But the last serious question though is, what is your greatest wish for agriculture? What is your greatest wish for the sector? And you're allowed multiple wishes.
It's breaking down the silos. I'd love, short term, I'd love to see us acknowledge the challenges that we face around the information ecosystem. Acknowledge that, because everyone's running scared from it now, right? That's if we poke into that, it'll be contentious. But acknowledging that and actually starting to talk about that, because it's well-being, isn't it? Like, people are getting stuck in those echo chambers, and that's a real well-being issue for our communities. But long term, it's a tricky one. There's so many.
I know.
Opening up that conversation, right, and backing our people that are bold enough to stick their head up above the parapet.
Cool.
Is that a good one?
Because I think, I
think that's mine. Because you see, it breaks my heart to see people cut down just because they're trying to be a bit brave, and we need brave.
Yeah, and I think everyone thinks everyone's experts and everyone thinks they can do better, yet they don't step up and do it. Yeah, and following. I'm going on here, but following I think is really important, because I think often you'll know people agree with you, but then when you speak out about something, you get like a private text behind that. Good on you, go you. But no one actually comes out in public and goes, yes, I love that, I'm with her. And we need not only brave leaders, but we need people that
jump in behind, and don't run scared of a bit of criticism, because you're never going to please everybody.
Like the what is it, the video when there's a big music festival and the guy gets up and dances by himself, and then what they talk about is it's the actual two people that danced with him that made the difference to the everyone else getting up, not him. And I think that's the key sometimes and that's such a beautiful point is, you know, if you don't necessarily want to be the one that's got your neck up, at least if you believe in that person that has, then openly support them, because one, it gives them the encouragement and the motivation they need, and also it demonstrates to others that they're not a lone nut, because being a lone nut's a real hard place to be.
First followers.
Well, Emma, thank you so much for your time, given I know how much you've got on your plate, and I literally have thrown this at you, but you know, and I'm not trying to blow hot air here, but I have the utmost respect for your leadership, and I think we're really lucky as a sector, and I sincerely hope that you can find the motivation and inspiration to continue being the leader that you are today. So thank you so much.
Thanks for having me, JJ.